My name is Bill Dunwoody. And I'm the chair of the healthcare division. And I'm very pleased to introduce Pam Henderson. Pam and I met back in March or April of this year, and she did a presentation on opportunity thinking. And at that point, I was very blown away by the concept. I was very impressed with the forward-thinking concept of looking for opportunities. So I would like to introduce Pam. Pam is a CEO of New Age Incorporated, a growth strategy and design firm that advises companies across every industry from Fortune 500 to startups and nonprofits. Pam speaks internationally and has published widely on market insight, business and innovation strategy and design. She will talk about opportunity thinking and how this approach is helping companies and organizations achieve sustainable quality. Please let's welcome Pam Henderson.
And thank you so much for having me. I'm just delighted to be here and just excited to meet all of you. I am going to go ahead and jump in and just give you a little bit of background. I bet no one's heard of opportunity thinking before. So has anybody heard of opportunity thinking? Okay, good. Then this is all going to be new and exciting and fun. So let's get going. I want to tell you a little bit about how I got started, because I didn't grow up thinking, oh, I'm going to talk about opportunity thinking one day. So let me tell you a little bit about the journey. I started out as a faculty member at Carnegie Mellon. I mean, before that, I had like paper routes and Kool-Aid stands and things like that. But this was my first really actually official job. And I was having a blast. I was in the business school. I thought I died and gone to academic heaven. I mean, it was great. So the question is, why did I go over to the dark side? Now, we all know that consulting is the dark side. And when I was a faculty member, I always looked at consultants as kind of like having sullied themselves, you know. And so I never intended to go there. And so the question is why? Well, I'm going to blame it on my husband. And that's not my husband, nor is that my perception of him. But he's a chemist. He does all this kind of expensive, he has these expensive toys in the lab, and I have a laptop. So his career ended up beating out mine at that moment in time, and we trucked out to the middle of nowhere in Washington State. And I know there's somebody here from Washington State University, so go Cougs, area in the back in the appropriately colored shirt, so wave to him. Okay, so go by and visit his booth. So I went out and I was in Washington State. I went on the faculty at Washington State University, and I was just real happy to be there. And I started working with the National Laboratory there. And that's out near in the eastern Washington area. And they do a lot of interesting work. But one of the things that happens is they have all these extra technologies sitting around that they've developed for government purposes. And they have to figure out, well, are there more purposes for these technologies? Could we commercialize them and maybe start some businesses? And this is the early 90s, so post-Cold War, so we're trying to figure out what to do with all these government facilities. And so the government starts saying, you know, hey, we need to get these technologies into the hands of businesses and create more economic benefit. So they call me up at the university and they say, could you help these little businesses commercialize these technologies? And I said, sure. And I hung up the phone and I thought, you know, I'm pretty sure absolutely nothing I've ever learned or taught is going to be of any value here. That's kind of humbling. But I realized that there was going to be some real challenges because these little businesses didn't really know what to do with the technologies. They were in love with them, but they didn't really know where to apply them. And some of them, a lot of them, had to do with quality. And now I don't have a quality background, so I'm here as a guest. But a lot of the things I'm talking about apply to quality, and I think it's important for us to be thinking about opportunities through the eyes of quality and quality through the eyes of opportunity. So some of these technologies, we're looking at these near-infrared sensors, and there's sensors that basically assess quality of food products and other products. And the question was, well, where do we take these? We don't really know what form they should be in, and we don't know what application, so we're kind of solving for two unknowns. And if you remember back to your math class, solving for two unknowns is kind of tricky. And that, I think, is the journey that a lot of us have to go on. Anytime that we're really trying to do something new, really find breakthroughs in quality, for example, we don't always know where to look. And so this was a bit of a journey of trying to figure out where to look. Well, on that journey, I found that these inventors were in love with their ideas. And that would seemingly be a very good thing. But as soon as you get real creative and you start falling in love with your ideas, you've got a problem. And I don't know if you've ever taken a creativity course, but there's a lot of literature on creativity. And as soon as you've solved one problem, which is being creative, maybe creative in how you're solving problems or whatever it is, you invite another problem. And that problem is a problem of focus. So let's say you're in a leadership position and you've got a team and you've got lots of ideas about where they should go, what they should do. The problem is you don't really know which idea to pick. And some people solve that problem by falling in love with one idea and sticking with it until their death. Have you ever seen people where they're like, I am so in love with my idea and I'm not listening to anything to the contrary, right? So that's one extreme, overly focused. The other extreme, though, is, this is me, I'm on the other extreme. I'm in love with my idea until another one comes, then I'm in love with that one, and then and it keeps going every time I take a shower or take a run or, go wherever, I'm got more ideas. Okay, so either way, it's a problem of focus. Well, one of the things that I saw was this problem wasn't just with small companies. As I started to work with Fortune 500 companies, and we work with a wide range of companies, from chemical companies like DuPont to product companies like John Deere to consumer goods companies like Procter & Gamble and food companies like Pepsi, so the full range. Well, you get into these big companies and the problem just multiplies. Now, I thought they'd be really good at this whole focus thing. They're not, right? Because the more people, the more ideas, and it turns out that at least in the product development world, it can take 3,000 ideas to get to 100 projects, to get to 2 products that go to market, only one of which breaks even. That's not lean. Does that look lean? That's not lean. Okay. And especially in a time where we are trying to find places to cut costs, this looks like a great place to cut costs because these guys aren't efficient, right? So this is about getting products to market, but we've seen the same thing in almost every function. It's projects that don't have the impact that they should. So that's a problem. Well, so I would argue that ideas alone are failing us. That just being creative and thinking up a lot of great ideas about things we can do and ways we can improve the world isn't good enough. We have to solve that other problem of focus. And one of the contributing factors to the reason ideas are failing us is because there's a lot of literature on creativity. Look at all that. Do you see what's on the cover of all those? Light bulbs. Now, it's my theory that if we were all that creative, we could have come up with a different cover for the book. Just saying. Okay, so I did. So, why is it that people are so in love with ideas and yet less in love with opportunity? Well, I think it's a very self-centered thing, to be quite honest. I mean, we're all kind of narcissistic deep down inside. And I think it's because we like to create the idea, and the idea is coming out of us. And that's a good thing. I honestly, truly believe that creativity is a good thing. Okay? But ultimately, we have to be opportunity focused, which is being others focused, being outside focused, and being thinking about the future in order to figure out which ideas are really going to help us. We need to be in love with the opportunities, not just the ideas. And that's why I wrote this book. It's called You Can Kill an Idea, but You Can't Kill an Opportunity. And there's a card about it on your table, so if you're interested. So think about that phrase for a minute. We can kill ideas, and actually we should kill ideas, and that's a process. Everyone in this room involved in quality has gone through the process of ideating, thinking up ways to solve problems, and then killing off some of those ideas. And if we think about it, that notion of an idea versus an opportunity is a lot like a problem and a solution. The problem's kind of the opportunity, the solution's the idea. So, what is opportunity? Well, the killer thing about writing a book is you actually have to articulate whatever it was in your head. And so you think you know what you're talking about all this time, and you realize, wow, I don't know if I've really stated it that clearly. So I tend to think in pictures, and the book itself is full of artwork you'll see throughout this talk. And I think that's because I'm kind of an 8-year-old at heart. I really like picture books still. I'm not a big reader of business books. I get kind of bored and a little ADD thrown in there. So I think of an idea as like a koi fish, and an opportunity is like the pond. Now, it turns out if you put a koi in a little fishbowl it's going to stay small. They sense their environment. This, unfortunately, does not work with other things that you would like to have stay small, like kittens, puppies, children. But it works with koi. Not really sure how God figured that one out. But works with koi fish. So it stands to reason if you want a big fish, you need a big pond. But the same is true for ideas. If you want a really big idea, you need a big opportunity. Now, most of us didn't wake up this morning thinking, I think I'll have a really small idea today. I'd like to think smaller. I want to go on the little side. I want to have a very small impact. Most of us want to have a big impact on whatever it is that we're doing. And yet, to have a big impact, we need to pick the problems that are the big problems to solve, the big opportunities. Okay, so now let's think about opportunity a little bit more. It comes from the word portu, which means into port. And it turns out that in the late 1300s, there were all these new ports being opened up. The Portuguese, the Spaniards, and a bunch of other people were all fighting over trade routes. And the Portuguese did something very interesting. They went down to Africa, and they saw these new sailboats that had a different cut. They stole some of the ideas, not stole, borrowed some of the ideas, took them off. They created an R&D function within universities. I think this is so cool. And they ended up creating the caravel. That's one of Columbus's ships was a caravel. So they create this caravel. Things are quite a bit faster, and it's all good and well. And ab portu means into port. And so as an old marketing professor, I'd say, well, the port must be where the opportunity is because that's where all the money is. But that's not what they were referring to. So they must have been referring to the technology, the boat, right? The design, the thing, the solution, the thing that was going to take cool stuff into port. But that wasn't what they were referring to. Turns out they were referring to the tide and wind conditions that got the boat the last mile into port. If there was not the right tide and wind conditions, that boat would stall. And it would sit there, and the goods would actually rot on the boat because it couldn't make it in. Now, how many of you have ever seen a big problem, so big port with needs, come up with a great solution, and it stalled? Has anybody ever had a stalled solution? Yeah. It's kind of too early to start confessing that kind of stuff, but we all know it happens, right? So why does that happen? Well, because the conditions in our organization or the conditions in the market are not conducive. So perhaps all of a sudden there's budget cuts. Stalled opportunity. Perhaps there's some other crisis in the organization, a bigger problem that raises its head. Or perhaps it's just that the day-to-day gets in the way. But the conditions aren't there to get that value into the port and realize the benefits of a true strategic opportunity. So we believe that opportunity lies in all three. The need, plus the value, plus the conditions that allow the two to come together. You have to have all three. So, let's look in the past. Here's a story. There was a need. Kodak, remember Kodak? Okay, so Kodak realized that there was this need. People didn't like film. It got exposed to light, it got damaged. People would lose their family photos in floods and in fires. Not great. So they created that pretty groovy looking thing. That is the first digital camera. I know, you want one. That's like the next iPhone. I mean, how cool is that? You could lug that thing around to soccer matches. Problem was the conditions weren't right. Do you realize they did this in 1975? And yet these were the conditions. Can you imagine bringing that thing home and you have to scoot the TV out and plug things in the back? And there's the microcomputer and all the different things all to get the pictures up on the television. So not ideal conditions. So what did they do? They didn't just kill the idea, they killed the opportunity and the company in the process. Had they held on to that and said, we just need to wait until the wind changes, they would still be in business today. So where is opportunity? You can see opportunity, I'm sure, because I believe that people that are invested in quality, and I do want to say just a note, the comment that you made about healthcare and the good that can be created, I feel that way. I feel really privileged to be here today because you are the ones that are behind the scenes that are making everyone else's life work great. And I'm very, very appreciative, whether it's healthcare or product quality or process quality, whether you're making my life great or whether you're making your colleagues' lives great. I think you guys are doing an incredible job. So I'm going to stop, and before you go clapping for me at the end of this talk, which I know you'll do, just courtesy, you guys need to give yourselves a round of applause. So everybody clap for yourselves. Yeah. Unsung heroes, I think, a lot of times. So, where is opportunity? Well, most of us think when we hear the term opportunity, or a lot of you, if you've ever heard, much in the business literature area about white space. Maybe you've heard of a book called Blue Ocean Strategy, and it's all about, the opportunities are in these blue oceans that are beautiful and pristine, and there aren't sharks running around eating everything. So there's a white space, there's a big open territory. But there aren't a lot of white spaces left. I mean, we're improving things. There are still areas where we desperately need more quality, but it's not like we're just stumbling on white spaces all the time. In fact, having no competition does not guarantee success. And a lot of little companies that say, I'll tell you why I'm going to succeed is because I got no competition. And I'm thinking, dude, just Google it, okay? There is lots of competition out there. And if you're not seeing it, it's probably because you haven't defined it broadly enough. So where might opportunity be? Well, we think that it's oftentimes in a black space. And for companies, this means that it's right smack dab in the middle of where they're competing right now, where there's a gob of products on the shelf. It might be for you, there's already plenty of processes in place, there's plenty to do in terms of improving quality, and sometimes it doesn't necessarily feel like there's this big gaping holes. Well, I'm going to tell you some product stories. Here's a really interesting story. And this is about these pill bottles. Now, if you'd come to me and said, hey, I've got a great area for innovation. You really need to innovate on these things. I'd go, no margin, no branding, no differentiation. That does not look like an exciting place to innovate. And yet it was. A gal saw that her grandmother was struggling with these pill bottles, not just to open them, which is a perennial problem, but because she was mixing them up. Do you know every year, quite a few people die completely unnecessarily because they get their medications mixed up. So she redesigned it. She flipped it on its head, put color tabs on it, flattened it out, took the patient information, sidelined it, put large print across the top and the sides. And that is an incredibly high quality solution. But this thing would have stalled. Think of it for a moment. You have this big opportunity, a need in the marketplace. People are dying, okay, and struggling. Not just dying, but you don't have to die to have it be a problem. It's still a problem if you're getting sick or you're just struggling. It's a problem, okay. You've got this great idea, a brilliant design, and the thing still would have stalled. But she figured out that she needed to work on the conditions. So she partnered with Target. She used their IT infrastructure so that it could all get into all the information systems could get in there. It had to go through FDA approval. But the other thing that happened was Target figured out that they needed an exclusive business relationship with her in order for this to make money. So Target couldn't really justify the expense of just buying more expensive bottles because you can't charge anybody more for the medication. So what they did was they created an exclusive relationship, which means that if you want to get these, you can only get them through Target, which means their foot traffic in their pharmacy increased by 10% a year for several years in a row. Great idea, big opportunity, would have stalled if all these other conditions hadn't been put in place. So we really do need all three. And yet here it was, smack dab in the middle of a black space. So now I'm going to make this a little bit more complicated and talk for a moment about what we call the 6 sources. And these are the 6 sources of opportunity. And so we talk about value can be created through our technologies, but it can also be created through our brands like Target. That's a brand, right, that created value. And our business model, which was that exclusive relationship. And then the needs in the market are always there. We always understand needs in the marketplace, but environment. Regulators are very demanding, and so I think that makes them needy. Okay? So regulators are needy, demanding. The culture is demanding. The culture is increasingly asking us to be very transparent as companies. Okay? The natural environment is needy. It needs us to be sustainable. And then most importantly for a lot of you is our own organizations are needy. Our own quality, they need smooth, efficient processes. They need lean thinking. So all of these things contribute to that need and that value. Smack dab in the center is the customer or the consumer. And then when you want to think about the conditions, you start to take that little model and add it all up. You take all of the different organizations that are out there, and it kind of creates this honeycomb of conditions. So, I know that's a lot to absorb, and you now know, yeah, she was a professor. I get it. She's trying to teach us to write down models and everything now. Well, all of it's in the book, but I think it's a useful way of thinking about need, value, and conditions. And quality plays a big role. So as we start to think about opportunity, and that's really what I'm passionate about, you see that the leaders of quality are really in the center of all this as well. Because we need quality technologies. We need quality in terms of our brand and expressions. We need quality in terms of our financial processes. We need quality in terms of how we think about our markets, the regulations, and then of course our own organizations. And so if opportunity is the combination of need, value, and conditions, then you can start to see that quality plays a role all across this opportunity thinking. Because that example I gave with the pill bottles, that was a quality issue, right? Those pill bottles were poorly designed and have been for years. And so solving problems through that lens actually opens our eyes to opportunity. So I believe that every person in this room, no matter what role you have in your organization, you have a role in being that opportunity whisperer. So I want you all to be opportunity whisperers to your organization. I want you all to be recognizing needs and helping create solutions. Okay, so let's think a little bit about seeing new opportunity. Well, I'm going to take you on a journey through the fields here, and we're going to go over to one of our clients in Moline, Illinois, and that is John Deere. So we're going to talk a little bit about a situation they had. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the tide. Okay, you see the word up there? Tide. Tide means the tide that brings in opportunity. So I'm going to use an acronym. I'm going to use that TIDE as an acronym. So, first we're going to start with trends. Trends is a lot like shuffling a deck. It deals us new opportunities. So what were the trends that they were thinking about? Well, John Deere, if you ask them what they're good at, they'll tell you that they are good at bending metal and painting it green. I think that's kind of underselling themselves, but that's what they say they're really good at. And yet, all of a sudden, there was all this stuff going on in the world that wasn't physical. It was digital. And they were starting to see devices show up all over the place, so much so that people were duct taping screens all over the insides of the cabs of their equipment. Now, that doesn't look like a good quality solution. So they had to go out there and get some fresh insight. And so they started to talk to people, and they saw that people wanted to participate in managing the information that was coming off of their machines. And this isn't just ag, it's also construction and forestry and all kinds of different equipment. And they started to see this new world where people want to participate. And they had people that were creating apps for their machines. They also had people hacking into their machines, and that gets to be a bit of an issue. So then they started to say, well, let's stretch our thinking about this, because they were really freaking out. And I mean freaking out. They asked us to come in and talk to them about this open architecture that was going on, which is like OnStar is an open architecture where some information, the car is now connected to the rest of the world, and it's, communicating back and forth. The problem that Deere had was this whole hacking thing. People are hacking into tractors and making them go faster than they should. They're not meant to do wheelies. That's spinning them in the parking lot. That's not supposed to be happening. You run over little animals and things like that. There's safety issues here. And so the safety people and the quality people were getting very uncomfortable. They're like, how can we guarantee safety if people are going to hack in and override certain systems that we have? And so then they started saying, well, but there was another group that were more on the market side saying, yeah, but people want to use the information coming off the machine, so they have to be able to access it some way. So there's this real kind of quandary about, do we let them have the information? What if they override safety concerns? On and on. So we started talking about, well, historically they've been very closed. They've taken information off the machines themselves, but they've stored it and forgotten about it. It's all about the physical, bending metal and painting it green, and it's all about control. Because these are big machines and people do get hurt with them, and it's important to have as much control as possible. But if you want to look for new solutions, it means you have to stretch things out. What about going open? What about analyzing your information and monetizing it? What about becoming a virtual? Or what about having no control? Now, it's not that we wanted to go to the far end on all of these, but this is a mapping tool. It allows you to kind of map out the whole space and think about it. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk to the ecosystem. And I want you to really listen to this one. This is really fascinating. When you have an organization that is scared to go someplace, and John Deere was very scared. There were some people who are saying, we've got to go, the future is digital, we've got to go. Absolutely true. Other people are saying, no way, not on my watch. This is not safe. We don't know how to close off certain systems and keep others open adequately. We don't know. We need to make our systems tighter, not looser. Okay? Both completely true. Well, we could have had workshops, we could have debated this, on and on and on, but none of that would have really changed things. Ultimately, what we did was we went out, we found people that had gone down this road before. So we talked to participants in the behaviors we cared about, influencers and observers. We went to people in aerospace that had had to open up information architecture. We talked to people in the airline industry, believe it or not, because it used to be that all those flights and all that information that we can get on our phones now used to be all closed off, and then travel agents were the only ones that had access, and then it became consumers. And that whole opening up of the information architecture was scary for them. So there's this amazing thing that if you bring in people that have been down this road before, it's very encouraging and freeing. You can ask your questions, you can express your fears. And so sometimes we have to help the conditions along a little bit. We have to kind of blow a little bit of wind into the sails to get our solutions into market and to learn the watch-outs, learn the lessons learned. So we also looked at how other companies were doing it, looked at analogous industries and mapped those out and kind of put it all together in what we call an opportunity landscape. And the result was that John Deere has gone forward with opening up their architecture because we got them over that hump. And we had everybody in the room that could object to this or express concerns. We made sure that all of the smart people were in there, from quality, from safety, from information systems, through to the marketing people. We got everybody together, a very cross-functional group that truthfully looked a lot like that little 6-source diagram. People from technology, people from brand, people from business model, all of those different folks. And together, we created something we could all live with. And it's called JD Farm Site, John Deere Farm Site. And it's this system where the tractors, let's say, have access to guidance systems. So they, this is astounding. And talk about a quality solution here. They will go down the field in the same tracks they've always gone down in with only a centimeter variation because they're guiding it. Because now what we've seen is we can bring value because we have less and less skilled labor in that tractor cab. And now we have, it's much more sustainable. We actually have more farmable land, and more importantly, it's using less energy. Because if I keep going down the same route, I don't have to go over new soil, and believe it or not, that actually saves a significant amount of fuel. So we have lower emissions. And so that's just one example. Other things, the dealers are now able to tell the growers when the product needs maintenance because they can do this preventative maintenance thing. They can see it from their dealership, which was a big deal because the dealers aren't owned by John Deere. So they're all independent. So this was like opening up information to all kinds of people. It was very, very terrifying. And yet it's working now. The dealers are able to tell the growers prior to harvest when the thing needs maintenance so that it doesn't fail in the middle of harvest, which would cost, millions of dollars. And there's a number of other systems as well. The dealer can actually look at your screen and help you figure out what you're supposed to do if you're confused about where to push the button. So it was a cross-functional group that explored this. And I know that's hard to do sometimes in your own organizations. We can't always force our organizations to behave in a cross-functional way. It's something we'd all love to do. But I think if we understand better that it's for opportunity's sake that we're doing it, it can help us at least drive the organization. We can start bringing in opportunity thinking. We can start getting the organization to realize the benefits of behaving in a real cross-functional way. Okay, I'm going to give another example, and this one actually comes from healthcare. This is a really interesting example of a company called Aethon. Most of you haven't heard of Aethon, but they do a little robot that runs around hospitals. And we're going to go back down the tide. So what were the trends that they saw? Well, lean was coming into hospitals finally. Hospitals are some of the later adopters of lean processes. And so we finally start seeing lean showing up in hospitals and processes and so forth. Very, very important. And it's, a number of you in the room have been leading the way in this, so we have a number of you to thank for this. But it's taken hospitals a while. A lot of companies, manufacturing companies, recognize the need for lean earlier than healthcare, earlier than the airline, so a number of industries have lagged a bit. Okay. What are some of the problems in healthcare? Well, I'm speaking to the choir here, so if I just give me some grace here. But people are taking more medications, and there's some statistics that say that 3% of the medications that leave the pharmacy never make it to the right person. That's a lot, right? A lot of theft. Not at Bill's hospital. None there. This would be other people's hospitals, not represented in this room. Okay. All those other people that don't bother coming to ASQ conferences, doggone it. Clearly, that's the problem. So, but there are issues. Medications are not making it to the people. There's mistakes being made, which again leads to illness. And so, and new rules, compliance rules, and then we have patient information rules, HIPAA, and all kinds of things, right? Lots going on. So we gather some insights. And we see that one of the big insights anytime you do work in healthcare is when you talk to nurses, what do they want to do? They want to spend more time with their patients. That is what they got into the industry for. And yet there's a bazillion things that are causing them to not spend time with their patients. So let's stretch out some dimensions on this. Well, we need to look at how robotics have been used. Could robots solve some of the medication problems? Could they take some of the stresses off of the nurses? Could they free up nurses to spend more time with their patients? Really a little confusing, right? It's kind of hard to imagine a robot running around a hospital. So one of the issues with robots as a solution is they generally need to be connected to something. Like they need to, a lot of these hospitals will put down little magnetic tracks so the robot knows where to go. Which you can imagine, that's kind of a big investment in an older structure. Question was, could we make it free moving? Could we give it unlimited access? Because as they started to do more insight work, they found out that there are problems or opportunities everywhere. There were opportunities for improvement in the laundry. You've probably all been keeping up with the whole Ebola thing. Nobody wants to take the waste from a hospital that's dealt with Ebola, but waste from hospitals in general is extremely expensive and dangerous, right? So moving waste around is not exactly a real human-friendly kind of thing, and yet that's who's doing most of it. And then the question was, is there a robotic solution? And what Aethon realized is there was not a robotic solution. You're like, didn't you tell me they were a robot company? They're a robotics plus solution. So the real issue wasn't solving the problem with robots. The real issue was figuring out what else you needed to add to solve the problem. So can the thing move up to a different floor? Do you have to have a robot that stays on the same floor all the time because it doesn't know how to walk up and down stairs or go up and down elevators? Or needs somebody to walk around with it, in which case you kind of wasted your time. So if it can't go to a different floor, then it can't deal with pharmacy, and it can't deal with laundry, and it can't deal with meals, right? So all of a sudden you've got like an intern walking around with the robot so it can push the elevator button? That doesn't make any sense. So what they figured out was they actually needed to spend their time not on the robot, but on all the other ancillary things. So we went out to the ecosystem, talked to pharmacists, nurses, doctors, janitorial staff, cafeteria staff, patients, all kinds of people. Because the other thing you don't want this thing doing is stressing people out, right? This is already a kind of high-stress environment. You don't want family members freaking out when they see this thing, right? They've already got enough stress, okay? You also have to make sure it's safe enough that people aren't tripping over it, running into it, it's not running people over, causing more accidents. So they talked to all kinds of different people and put it all together into an opportunity landscape, and the result was this thing called TUG. Now, TUG is fascinating. If you haven't seen this, you really should go online and see this thing. It's pretty cool. So first you can see it's very versatile. The same little TUG can have racks put on it, it can carry medications, it can carry dirty laundry, it can carry meals. Turns out that in just one Pittsburgh hospital, which is where Aethon is based, this thing delivers something like 13,000 meals a month and removes hundreds of thousands of pounds of waste and deals with hundreds of thousands of pounds of laundry. It's phenomenal. Now, it's a fleet. It's not just one little guy running around, right? It can go up and down elevators. If there's a janitorial bucket sitting there, somebody mopped the floor, see? It doesn't just run into the janitorial bucket and start racing the bucket down the hall with it, sloshing water everywhere. It's pretty smart. It adjusts. It knows the floor plan, and if there's a change in the floor plan, there's some construction, you just have to put it into the floor plan, and it decides it's going to go a different way. So what have we just done with this? Not only have we created a quality solution, but we've increased quality of care because now nurses can spend more time with their patients, and we're keeping hazardous waste away from people, so all kinds of different things. And I think this is an opportunity that's truly born out of a need for higher quality. It was those pinch points of medications going to the wrong people or waste delivery or whatever. Those pinch points are the opportunity. They're a problem, and it's always kind of irritating if you got a problem with somebody says, "Oh, your problem, that's an opportunity." It's kind of irritating when they do that, when it's your problem, I think, But the truth is, it is an opportunity. Any problem really, truly, truly is an opportunity, and this is certainly a good example. So it's all connected in. You can, it's touch screens and digital and self-cleaning and all kinds of cool stuff. So now the question is, how do you become an opportunity thinking company? Wouldn't it be great if I'm sure you're thinking, who needs to be in the room right now? I know. If you're like, doggone it, why isn't she telling my boss this? Why isn't she telling that other department I can't ever get to listen this? Well, we can do that. We can talk. But how do you get a company to become opportunity thinkers? Or how do you even get your own team to become opportunity thinkers? Well, we worked with another company called USG, and that's US Gypsum. They make sheetrock and ceilings, and sheetrock is very heavy, and so they then figured out a way to lightweight it, which is spectacular for people, hence this ad campaign that they ran. And they came to us and they said, "We want a bunch of really good ideas." And I said, "Okay, cool. So what opportunities are you going after with these ideas?" And they said, I don't know. I said, well, we probably shouldn't start developing ideas if we don't know the opportunities, because then we don't know what we're trying to solve for, and we're just randomly solving for whatever we individually in our own little heads think is the opportunity. Maybe it would be better as a company to identify our company-wide opportunities. They said, okay, yeah, let's do that. They said, but we don't want you to come in and act like a normal consultant. I'm like, that works for me, because I still don't like consultants, and I am one. So, and why do I not like them? Because I feel like they rob the organization of important experiences. And so our company philosophy is we need to get the company doing the work, because the conditions are never going to be right for opportunity if the conditions aren't right within the company, and the conditions aren't going to be right in the company unless the people in the company are passionate about the opportunity, and it doesn't do any good if I'm passionate about it and the company isn't. So our whole thing is to be like kind of whispering opportunity people and have them get passionate about it. So that's what this was about. So we ended up creating these workbooks and sent them out to everybody in the company. Well, that's an exaggeration. We sent them out to a couple hundred people, 250 people. And they had to do Tide. They had to figure out the trends themselves, and they had to figure out the insights and do some dimensions and ecosystem stuff. They had to do it themselves. And then all we did was we helped to kind of assimilate it and pull it back together. We did some webinars across all the regions, which was really cool because then everybody got to hear everywhere. Now this looks like a mad woman, right? Writing on the walls. But that's our facility. We have this big innovation center with whiteboard paint on all the walls. And so we just started writing up all the things that were coming out of the books. I mean, we're really old-fashioned. We like paper. We like pens. And so writing all this stuff up, we got some of their leaders together and started to pull it all together and started to see some really cool patterns. And these guys were so creative. The insights are in the organization. I don't know if you've ever heard people, try to get into this whole creativity thing. And some people will say, I'm not the creative type. And a lot of people that are drawn to things like HR or safety or accounting or quality, you may be creative in solving problems within your own area, but you're not trying to go invent new products. And so we've seen organizations try to roll out creativity programs to get ideas for new products and make a lot of people real uncomfortable. They say, well, that's just not me. I'm not the inventor. I work here, I want to see the company succeed, but that's not me. And so what we've seen, though, is that actually everybody can think about opportunity. Every single person can sense opportunity. They may not know the solution, but every single person can see what's going on in the environment. They can have new insights. They can stretch thinking. And so in this case, we had USG, and this is a company that had been beaten down. They were $4 billion in 2008 before the recession, and because of the recession, they're now $2 billion. Half the size. That is a company that has gone through a lot and is still standing. But that generally doesn't create a real, enthusiastic workforce. So we didn't know what we were going to get. Oh my gosh. It was like the floodgates opened up. We had people stapling extra pages into their workbooks to give additional insights because they were so excited about telling us where they saw opportunity. So they talked about trends. Somebody gave us this picture of this shipping container hotel. If you don't like the configuration, you can move the shipping containers around. For real. There's just like a stair structure that stays the same. So a shipping container hotel, 3D printing of houses. You can literally have this big arm that runs around and prints a house in a day. Okay. Ethnographies, they went out and they talked to people at sites and got insights that way and came back and shared them. Not about how to solve the problem, but about where the problems were. And then somebody did some dimensioning work. They said, well, what if you could have $1 sheetrock, piece of sheetrock for $1? And everyone would be like, oh, that's just stupid. You can't have a piece of sheetrock for $1. But it doesn't matter. What that gets you to is to saying, what would a really low-income piece of sheetrock be? Is it just sheeting? Is there something that would provide similar functionality? What does it need to be in developing countries? And then the other extreme is, well, what if it were a $1,000 piece of sheetrock? And it was like, oh, well, that's dumb. Nobody's going to do that. But actually, it starts you thinking, how much information would have to be in that sheetrock? How connected would it have to be? And so it's a very good creativity tool. So they pulled it all together, and we ended up creating an opportunity landscape. And the landscape is really just kind of a hierarchy of opportunities. It's these big places to play, like healthy buildings was one of the ones. So within healthy buildings, there would be a bunch of spaces. And those spaces would be different types of things that you could do to drive towards healthy buildings. And then within a space, let's say it has to do with low emissions, no emissions coming off of whatever it is, your carpet, your walls, your paint, whatever it is. No, volatile stuff coming out. That might be then a space, no emissions, and then your idea platforms would be the specific things. Well, do I want to reduce emissions in the carpet? Do I need to reduce it in the walls? Or maybe one of the spaces would be ergonomics. How can I improve the ergonomics of the construction of the home so that people aren't hurting themselves? And so you start to create products that are easier to carry in and easier to put up and lightweight and easier to snap in and don't require the same kind of repetitive actions. Okay, so each of those is an idea, a space, and then you go into what the ideas are, and then you actually develop products and services. And what this is middleware. Middleware is the idea that you have a corporate strategy that says we're going to grow and we're going to be great and we're going to be quality, and it looks like everybody else's corporate strategy and vision, right? Their vision statement could be anybody's. And then you're told to go do your job. But there's no middleware. There's no direction on which problems do we want to solve. And so this is really a hierarchy of the problems that we want to solve. And I'd encourage you to think about doing something like this in your own organizations. Create a picture like this that says, these are the big territories that we're going to go after. It helps you prioritize, right? Because I bet most of you see more problems than you think you'll ever solve in your career. Like, the number of problems I can solve are truly endless. And that's good. I'm glad you see it that way, because you're making my life better by creating higher quality products and services. So your mind is on all these new things to be done, and yet you don't have a mechanism for prioritizing them. So that's what this is. This is a way to say, what are the really big problems to solve, and what are going to create the most value? So if we go back to the ship, what's going to create the most value? How are we going to impact the most people, the most lives, and also help our organizations truly, truly succeed in the market? So, in the end, what we're talking about here is helping your organization grow. That's why the flower's on the front and not the light bulb, okay? Is we're ultimately thinking about growth here. Is that while you may be more behind the scenes, you are an absolutely critical part of your company's growth. And if your company grows, you yourself have more growth opportunities, you get more funding, for your function, all of those things are good. So how can you and your organization grow? Well, first, avoid the pitfalls. Don't go it alone, and don't focus on just ideas. Don't always be coming back to your boss, and this is really important. When you sell a program for improvement to your organization, focus them on the opportunity. Focus them on the need. Focus them on the benefit it's going to create. Don't focus them on how cool your idea is and how cool the things are that you could do. That's the pitfall you want to avoid. You also don't want to go it alone. You don't want to just be your function saying that this is important. You want to go and get other believers, okay? So do the meetings before the meetings and sell the idea across the organization, but sell the opportunity first. Don't ever be selling ideas, sell opportunities. Once people are convinced of the opportunity, then they're going to be more convinced of the idea. See, I think one of the problems is that you all have incredibly deep expertise. And so you know what a good idea looks like. You know what ideas are going to work and what won't work. And so when you go and you pitch those ideas to your organization and they don't buy into it, you're irritated, most likely, I would be, because you're like, doggone it, I've got the expertise, I'm the one that knows, right? And I know some of you have felt that way, okay? So what's the problem? The problem is, in many cases, it isn't that they aren't sold on the idea, it is that they are not sold on the opportunity. They're not sold sufficiently on the problem. So sell them on the problem, and then they'll rely on you for your expertise to solve it. You can be an organization of opportunity thinkers. Now, these are my meerkats. I love meerkats. I don't know why. I just think they're hysterical. They all stand up on mounds and look around, right? And I think they're a great example of opportunity thinkers. That's what we should be. We should all be standing on mounds looking around. And when I talked about trends, I want to be clear. We're not looking at what's happening today. We're looking at the future, right? We're thinking about the future, and every one of you has probably got enough to keep you busy just today. And that's a real problem. And in quality, oftentimes we're looking not at today and not at the future. We're looking at the past, right? We're analyzing the past. And that's our job. Analyze the past. But if you really want to be selling your organization on opportunity, you need to also be analyzing the future. And that's that forward thinking, opportunity thinking, focusing on trends. So I want you to all be meerkats and look out to the future. I want you to look for big ponds and other big problems to solve, and try to go on those fishing trips together with your colleagues, be cross-functional. And keep thinking about how the opportunity is the need plus the value plus the conditions. You may be working on the value creation through your solutions, but you need to also be really helping to articulate the need, and you need to be fostering the right conditions. Opportunity can exist in the black space, but it's going to take the entire organization to capture it. And opportunity requires a village and a vanguard to both capture it and sustain it. And in the end, I believe that achieving new levels of growth really requires that collaboration with your colleagues, because that boat, the port, the conditions, that's the whole organization. It's not one part. So, you can be opportunity thinking. You see, they graduated. Now they're officially opportunity thinkers. Okay. So, and in the end, opportunity thinking is an opportunity itself. It really is. To think opportunity and act collaboratively is truly an opportunity in itself. It is truly a different way of thinking that will allow you and your organization to accomplish the goals that you're looking to accomplish. So that's what I have today, and I'd love to answer any questions if you have any. There's a mic if you want to ask questions. There's one in the back. I don't know if there's a walking mic. You can shout.
Why don't you connect with that mic there, and I'll take this around as a walking mic.
You might be able to hear my question from here.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, this notion of middleware, and you're right, I didn't spend a lot of time on that. So what I see is that corporations will have an overall vision and strategy. Business units will have a vision and strategy. But there's this really big gap between where they say they want to win and the insight needed to plan out projects. So it feels to me like in most organizations there's this gap, and that gap is that kind of that hierarchy of territories that we were looking at before. Let me get back there. It's that specification about exactly which problems we want to go after and in what order. So it's in essence, it's your project roadmap. And what I find is, particularly in the innovation space, which is where I play predominantly, and I touch quality in everything that we do, we're always bringing the quality and the safety people in. But what I find is that there's just not enough guidance about which problems to solve and in which order. And so what happens is people jump all the way from kind of this business goal all the way straight into trying to plan projects without ever having ordered out the opportunities. So I believe that opportunity is the middleware that's missing. It's the thing that sits between some overall corporate goal and the actual projects that we do. Does that help? Okay, good. I kind of rushed over that part. Other? Yes.
My question is, how much time it takes? I assume that you can work with the John Deere with that case study, right?
Yes.
How much time it takes to get an organization, get that momentum, and after you leave as consultant, is organization self-sustained so they can replicate that in the future as well?
Yeah. You know, it depends a lot on how big a pond it is, right? But actually it's not that long in a lot of ways. It's, 12, 14 weeks of a process, which is not bad when you're talking about organizational change, because organizations can take forever. The most influential piece in that entire process, well, there's two. One is the collaboration, the cross-functionality, and then the other is the ecosystem. And on your tables, there's just something that we thought we'd provide. It's a review of both the book as well as it talks about this organization called Industrial Research Institute. And in the Industrial Research Institute, we did some work for them, and we found that the #1 driver of breakthrough was cross-functionality. We looked at companies where they got breakthrough innovation and sometimes and not other times, and we found that the differentiator was collaboration and cross-functionality. So if we can get that cross-functional group, now granted, it may take a while to get the organization to invest in it. So all of the conversations that happened that said, we need to do something about this open architecture thing, that could have been months, right, preceding us showing up on the scene. But once we showed up on the scene and we got them all working together across everybody, made sure all of the concerns were in the room at the same time, that the people that were worried about safety and so forth were all there with the people who wanted to go and, do crazy stuff. That was the first factor. And then the second factor was getting the ecosystem in there, because they really create belief. And we have a model for thinking about this. I'll just tell you real quick. So Aristotle, pretty smart guy, right? I figure if I can be like even a fraction as smart as Aristotle, I'm in good shape. So one of the things Aristotle said was that persuasion takes 3 things: logos, ethos, and pathos. Now, we typically only work on the logos. The logos is the logic. It's the business case. It's the data. It says we have this many accidents a year, we have this much medication getting lost, we have this much, labor being put into XYZ. It's the data. Ethos is the people. That is the people, the cross-functional group, the people that are fearful and excited and all the different people, as well as the people in the ecosystem, the people that have gone down that road before that aren't even in our own companies. Pathos is the passion. If you want somebody to go do something new, you have to persuade them. And if you want to persuade them, you have to persuade them across those 3 different elements: the logic, the social aspects of it, and their own personal emotions and passions. So, in order to accelerate that, we truncate the process by getting cross-functional groups together, getting the ecosystem together, and then creating experiences together where there's greater belief. So it's a lot faster if you get those 3 elements working. It will almost be eternal and never happen if you don't get all 3 elements. Because doing something new is scary. People are putting their careers on the line when they're changing processes in quality, changing processes in innovation. They're putting their careers on the line, and so they better believe it kind of heart, mind, and soul. So, yes?
My question is about how you would go about assessing. Thank you. If you come into a new company that you're going to work with, how you go about assessing the degree to which opportunity thinking is the area that should be focused versus execution. So I imagine the maker of the old pill bottles perhaps thinking the key to our future is making these things less expensively and faster.
Yeah.
So how do you do that assessment, and what guidance could you offer if we're doing that within our companies?
That's a super insightful question. Thank you. So I believe that there's typically is opportunity both close in and far. Now, if I were the pill bottle maker, you're right. The thing to solve for was not making them cheaper and faster, right? The thing to solve for was the fact that they really weren't adequate. It's a tough question. Typically, we'll look at what's happening in the world, trends, right? That's that first T. What's changing? Are the things that are changing putting pressure on the company? The insights is, are there compensating behaviors? So I'll tell you some compensating behaviors you could see in that situation with the pill bottle. First, people are struggling with it. So elderly people have all different kinds of tools and mechanisms for opening bottles, or they'll leave them open all the time, right? So then they're knocking them over and picking them up, and so you're seeing all these kind of extra behaviors that aren't really associated with taking the pill. They're extraneous. Another compensating behavior is what's happening with people our age. We're the ones that are organizing the pill bottles for our parents. We're the ones that are creating color-coded systems on the counter and saying, always put this pill bottle back on the counter. And that's what this gal was doing. She's like, why am I creating this system for my grandmother why isn't the pill bottle creating that system, right? So when we start to see compensating behaviors, we know that there's opportunity. Another compensating behavior we saw once was we were working with the North Face, and we were trying to see if there was still opportunity for more fabrics that would wick moisture away. Well, there's a gob of fabrics out there in the sporting clothing area that wick moisture away and have lots of promises. So we thought, well, maybe that space is really a black space and there isn't anything else we can do there. But then we talked to athletes and we said, how's it going? And they're like, yeah, I'm always clammy. Okay, clammy doesn't sound like I've solved the problem. But they said, well, what do you do? Well, how do you get rid of the clamminess? Well, this was guys talking. I ride my bike up to the top of the hill. I take off my shirt. I tie it to the back of the bike. By the time I get down the hill, it's dry. I put it back on so I'm not freezing when I go back up the hill. That doesn't sound like, they did not wake up in the morning and say, I think I'll go out and take on and off my shirt all day long and tie it to the back of my bike. That's not why they're out there. They're out there to ride their bike. So when we see a compensating behavior, we know that there is an opportunity for innovation. So those are just, I mean, there's a few different things that we look for. I'll give you one other example, and this is kind of neat, because this is perfect from a standpoint of limited resources. So probably most of you are thinking, that's really cool, that somebody has the resources to go hire a consultant, go do this stuff, you know, that doesn't apply to me. You can get insights, everybody can get insights, and you know this yourselves, you're investigators at heart, investigators and problem solvers. But you can get the insights you need. I'll give you a quick example from a hospital, and we don't just work with healthcare, it just happened to be another hospital story. They wanted to have more women have babies at their hospital, and so they said, go do a survey of women and figure out why they've had babies at our hospital. And we said, no, we're not gonna do that. They said, why? Because we can already tell you why women are having babies at your hospital. Oh, really? Why? Well, because all the statistics show that women choose the hospital for having their baby based on location. Nobody wants to drive a gazillion miles when they're in labor. And the doctor, they just go wherever their doctor tells them to go. So we said, well, tell you what we will do. We'll go look at the women that don't fit that profile. So they were able to find women that were not in the same zip code and weren't admitted by a faithful doctor, a loyal doctor. Talked to these women, and they said, well, I can tell you why I chose the hospital, and this is all individuals. I chose it because I thought they'd value the spiritual aspects of bringing life into the world. We thought, oh, duh, it's a Catholic hospital, of course, we kind of missed that variable. So we went back and asked them, well, you know, are you Catholic? Nope. Most of them weren't even religious. They were like, I'm a more spiritual person, but I just believe there are spiritual aspects of healthcare that people are ignoring. We thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Now, this was 20 out of like thousands of women that had babies. There were only about 20 that fit this weird profile. So we thought, I wonder if that applies to other areas in care. So we started looking at rehabilitative care and a bunch of the softer cares, and we found that across the board, this hospital was beating its market share. Now, it was third in a hospital of 3, but they were beating their market share in the softer care areas. And in those softer care areas, the people that weren't in the zip code or seeing a faithful doctor all said the same thing. I thought they would care about the emotional aspects of healthcare or the psychological. I thought they'd be better about that. Okay, so we started seeing this theme. So we went out to the larger community and we did a survey, and we found that there was this unmet need for a hospital to really focus on that. So over the next few years, what happened was that hospital ended up underinvesting in the really high-tech areas where there were other hospitals in the area that were stronger anyway. And they decided to go down the road of differentiation. And they differentiated themselves by really telling the story of some of the really cool things they were doing in terms of like pet therapy, where dogs come in and people pet them, people holding people's hands, people praying over people. I mean, just a lot of amazing things. But it wasn't just what the people told us. So I'm giving you some insight into how to get there. 20 women, started with 20 women, completely repositioned the hospital, and it became the most profitable hospital in the community in a matter of a couple of years, because they decided to differentiate. And it wasn't just those insights, it was also the trends in the ecosystem So we went out and we found that all these authors were starting to write on prayer and medicine or emotional aspects of recovery and things like that. So there was this kind of opportunity sitting there all along that nobody had isolated. So long answer to your question, you guys will, be wary if you ask questions now, you get long answers. In answer to your question, you go out and you do that work. You do the tide, you do the trends and the insights and the dimensions in the ecosystem. And in some cases, you'll find that there's opportunities simply to improve the current product, and that's appropriate. In other cases, you'll find new opportunities that you didn't see sitting there. But my encouragement to you is that you can do this by looking for unusual users, unusual uses, unusual behaviors, compensating behaviors. You can start to see opportunity by looking for sometimes not the norm, but the variance. So, okay, I think our time's up. I'm around, though, if you've got other questions.
Okay. I'd like to thank Pam for her presentation. I'd like to also offer you a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you.